Welcome everyone, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the disassembly of a vintage Amiga pocket watch. Now this pocket watch is made from plain steel, and the reason for this is because it's a lot cheaper than gold or silver, but unfortunately plain steel has a tendency to rust, so that you may notice the pocket watch case itself is actually very black in colour. And the reason for that is because in order to prevent rust and maintain the attractiveness of the watch, the main steel case is hot chemically treated to create this black oxide. And that's the reason for the blackness of this metal. Now, a lot of people commonly call this a gunmetal case, and that's not really true. It's just plain steel that's been chemically treated. So we're going to start by removing the stem, and to do that we need to loosen off the setting lever bolt. And the next thing we're going to do is remove the only remaining movement retaining screw, which is actually incorrect, because you may notice that this is a crosshead screw and not a flat-headed screw. And it's also black in colour rather than being made from a clear steel. So the next stage for this watch is to remove the bezel, because the movement has to come out of the front of the watch, and I usually use a hobby knife with a fine scalpel blade. The blade is nice and thin, so it can fit in the gap between the main case and the bezel, and you can usually just pop the bezel right off. This one's proving a little bit stiff and a little bit tricky, as it often can be with these older watches. So to remove the movement from the watch, we need to open it back up, and we can gently push it through with our fingers, being careful not to damage or touch the balance. Next we're going to replace the stem back in the movement so that we can set the hands to 12 o'clock, and this will make it easier to remove them from the watch. So we're just going to tighten down the setting lever bolt. And just before we take the hands off, we can notice that the ratchet wheel just keeps turning and a click can be heard, so we know that the mainspring is actually broken. When removing hands, I like to use a plastic dial protection sheet and then top that with a clear silicone sheet, again to prevent any damage whilst removing the hands. And I'm using 5mm hand levers here to remove the hands. With the sub-dial hand, you don't actually need the plastic sheet, you can just use the clear silicone sheet to remove the hand. The next stage will be to remove the dial, and securing the dial is 3 screws. Unfortunately, to begin with, I only noticed 2 of the screws and missed the 3rd one, so I end up trying to remove the dial whilst only 2 of the screws are actually undone. But we do eventually get there. So with all the screws loosened off, we can gently ease off the dial. And now we can start to disassemble the actual movement itself. We're going to start by removing the hour wheel and cannon pinion from the dial side. So this is one of my favourite tools, the cannon pinion removal tool. version make a similar one, but this one's actually from K&D, I think, so it's an American cannon pinion tool that you can't get anymore, unfortunately. So now we're using a carbon fibre large movement holder to hold the movement in place. You can see the balance is swinging. There is still a little bit of power coming from the mainspring, even though it's broken. So it's still good practice to make sure that you remove any power that's left in the watch before you start to disassemble it. So that's what we're going to do here. So as you can see, even with a broken mainspring, there can still be power trapped inside that barrel. So the first stage here, we're going to remove the balance cock and balance from the movement, and we're going to safely put it to one side until the movement is completely disassembled. It's always worth taking your time and taking great care when removing the balance, because the balance is such a delicate part, you don't want to cause any damage to it. So next we're going to move on to removing the pallet cock and the pallet fork. Again, you want to be careful when removing the pallet cock, because the pallet staff does also have very fine pivots, and you can easily damage them by over lifting the cock and bending the staff pivots in place, and then you'll have to acquire a brand new set of pallets for the movement, and older movements like this, they're not readily available. So there are the pallets there, then go in the tray. And then next we're going to move on to the ratchet, crown and barrel bridge, and we're going to start to disassemble that and also remove the click as well. Now on this particular watch, the ratchet wheel is secured by a normal right-handed screw, and the crown wheel is secured by a left-handed screw. So you actually loosen it to tighten it and tighten it to loosen it. Which I'm sure some of you out there have come across before. So the ratchet wheel is going to come off nice and easy. However, the crown wheel feels very stiff and doesn't seem to want to come off at all. This can be the case when a watch hasn't been serviced or maintained for a very long period of time. Old oils can dry out and become very troublesome when it comes to the disassembly side. The best thing to do in this case is not to rush, never to apply too much pressure. If it doesn't want to come out very willingly, then you don't really want to force it unless you have been left with no other option. So I'm just working it very carefully here to make sure that it'll come off in one piece without damaging any of the teeth. Even though I'm using steel tweezers, I'm not lifting hard, I'm not applying any great pressure, I'm just trying to gently ease it off. Unfortunately, in this case, the wheel doesn't want to come off using conventional tools. So what we can do is we can use a piece of Rodico, and we can just use enough pressure and it'll lift off like so. So we're just going to separate these two pieces, the crown shim and the crown wheel. They seem to be very stiff, very well stuck together. So now we're going to move on to the barrel bridge, and we're going to start to undo that, but before that we'll take the click off, which is fairly straightforward and simple on this old Omega pocket watch. Now for the barrel bridge, secured only by 2 screws. And gently lifting the barrel bridge off, checking underneath for any signs of damage, but that seems okay. And there's the mainspring barrel, and you might notice there that the previous watchmaker has left marker pen ink on the main plate to indicate certain directions. I'm not sure why that would happen, but these are the things that you can find when disassembling watches. So now we've moved on to the train wheel bridge. I'm going to remove that, again secured with 2 screws. The centre wheel stuck there in the middle pivot hole, and with those bridges out of the way, the stem naturally wants to fall out under its own weight. So there's the centre wheel removed, the third wheel, the fourth wheel, and of course, last but not least, the escape wheel. Quickly checking each to make sure the pivots aren't broken. So now it's time to flip the movement over and start working on the dial side components. So the first part on this particular model we're going to undo is the little setting bridge here. I call it the kidney bridge because it's shaped a bit like a kidney bean. And then we can remove the yoke after that, and then after that the setting lever and setting bolt. The yoke will just lift off. Now if we turn it over, we can loosen the setting lever bolt, and that will release the setting lever on the other side. And now the last stage before the movement goes into cleaning is to attach the balance cock and balance to the plate, and I find that this is one of the best ways to make sure that the balance both gets clean and is kept secure whilst it's being cleaned. Some people can choose to clean the balance manually by hand without putting it through a machine, which is again down to personal preference, but I actually like to reattach it to the main plate and put it through the machine that way. I usually get the best results by doing that, but this balance doesn't seem to want to sit in its place correctly, so it takes a couple of tries to get there, but again, it's never worth rushing this stage. You don't want to damage the balance because it's such a delicate component of the watch. So we're going to secure the balance cock down now with this screw, and we're going to do it very gently to make sure that the pivots are in the correct place, and we'll know that by gently shaking the watch and then double checking afterwards that the balance is completely free. So now that main plate's ready to go into the cleaning machine. And the last stage of this disassembly is actually to open up the mainspring barrel and see just what kind of damage has gone on inside. And we can do that on this particular barrel by using a driver to open up the lid. Carefully lift that off. Extremely dirty inside, and we can rotate the barrel arbor in the opposite direction, and it comes out quite easily. Normally the mainspring is damaged or broken near the arbor, but this seems to be the one instance where the spring is actually broken at the further end of the spring. And you can never assume the spring that you remove from the mainspring is the original spring, the correct spring for a watch. But you can sometimes find this out later on down the line when you're checking the timing. But you can notice that there is a lot of rust on this spring, and it's come off on the finger cots, and there's plenty of rust inside the barrel itself. And again, the markings from what appears to be a black marker pen indicating a certain direction. And that's the disassembly of this pocket watch is now complete, and all the parts are in a tray ready to go into the machine. So be sure to check back again with the next video in this series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, add a like. If you want to see more, then by all means subscribe. But until the next time, take care and have fun.